So last night was the second round of the first Democratic debate. We've now seen all 20 candidates go, and after the first night, I was pleasantly surprised. I thought they were all pretty civil. They weren't really grandstanding too much. I mean, as far as politicians go, they always grandstand, but with that handicap, I thought most of them were pretty reasoned and seemed to actually express ideas that they somewhat believed in, with the exception of Cory Booker and Beto, who of course are pretty fake people. Night 2, however, more than made up for the pleasantness of Night 1. Last night was absolutely awful. I thought it was completely unhinged. You essentially had poor old Lester Holt up there trying to lead a three-ring circus. What I feared the first night the most was essentially that you would have a rat race between all these candidates trying to out-commie each other and essentially offer more and more free stuff, which, the first night I actually heard some reasoned debate and people seemed to actually disagree, and they weren't just trying to outflank each other to the left at every turn that they could. However, last night that was much more prevalent. There were a couple voices who were trying to speak about trying to tone down the free stuff rhetoric, namely Hickenlooper. And so what you had really was a lot of bickering and people who really seemed to me desperate to get their voices out because, when you're all just offering the same free crap, it's hard to differentiate yourself. So you just kind of have to hog the mic as much as you can and make sure that your face is on screen and the people recognize your voice. And that's the only way that you're going to build any sort of a base, because really everybody has copied Bernie's platform at this point, at least on domestic policy. Obviously, of the folks up there, Bernie was pretty much the best on foreign policy. He called out the genocide in Yemen, which I was very happy to see him do. Now, obviously, Bernie is not particularly popular because of his foreign policy. He's popular because he gives out free stuff. And so, of course, those who want to simply attract Bernie's voters and copy what was successful for him do not copy his very good foreign policy. No, they instead copy his no good, very bad domestic policy. So you can have a total narc like Kamala Harris come across and try and attract away the Bernie bros, but with the added benefits of saying, hey, not only am I a woman, which is better than Bernie because he's a nasty old man, but I'm somewhat black, and so she gets the intersectionality points. So she's considered to be the better, more SJW-friendly candidate versus Bernie, even though she is in favor of mass murder, also known as endless war. After watching last night, I really think that Buttigieg and Harris are the most dangerous folks on that stage because they come across probably the most favorably to your SJW left crowd while still being in favor of the most heinous and evil government policies on the planet. They can sort of get away with locking folks in cages and doing it with a smile because they have those extra intersectionality points. Kamala Harris, of course, most infamously joked about locking up single mothers who had children who were truants, apparently. I guess in Kamala Harris's eyes that locking up parents because their kids skip school is perfectly acceptable, but not in my mind, and I don't think in the mind of your average left-winger is that considered okay. Some might go so far as to argue that, hey, maybe if the government is locking up parents who don't perhaps send their kids to the government indoctrination camps, also known as public schooling, perhaps you're living in a police state. And if you live in a police state and you want to end that, the last person you would want to elect to end that would be a narc like Kamala Harris. Now, unfortunately, this is something that Trump, I don't think, really would be able to attack her for in a general election, since Trump is supposed to be Mr. I love the cops and I'm big and tough and blah, 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 and Kamala Harris really takes that same approach. She is a tough-on-crime prosecutor. That's, what she was. And actually, I thought it was pretty funny. Joe Biden got in a dig at her and said how when he got out of law school, he didn't become a prosecutor, he became a public defender, which I thought was a pretty great line, considering that Harris did some nasty stuff and that folks on the left, typically don't like prosecutors. Because you have to remember the incentive structure here is different. I mean, you can't really get mad at prosecutors for this, but their job, like it or not, is to throw as many people in prison for as long as possible, and that's how they're graded on their job performance. It's about how many years of prison time have you gotten people sentenced to as a result of what you did. That's how they judge each other. And, I think that that's gross and disgusting, but that's what she did for her whole life. I mean, she was, until she was elected to the Senate, she was always a government cop or an attorney. I mean, not only is she a lawyer, she's a lawyer for the government. That's pretty nasty. Now, Buttigieg is kind of interesting because I think he's a stealth hawk as far as foreign policy goes. He paid lip service to, quote-unquote, ending the endless wars, but if you listen to his language about wanting to bring back the draft, that doesn't exactly sound like someone who is a foreign policy dove. It sounds like someone who wants to bring the military into everyone's living room and make everyone really suffer the consequences of war, although you could say that perhaps if everyone gets drafted, then you'll have a lot more anti-war people because they'll have a stake in ending the wars, but I don't think that's his intention. I think his intention is really the mobilization of the populace, which is, a fascist tactic. He really seems to want to use the way he speaks, use the military and the draft to erase individuality in our society, to make folks homogenized, to make sure that all men have the same crew cut and that women all tie their hair in a real tight bun. I mean, that's frightening, especially for anybody who thinks that Donald Trump, of all people, is a fascist. I don't know how you look at this Buttigieg fellow and not see Mussolini in his eyes. It's something else. He is a veteran of the Afghan War, and normally I think that you have a chance with a lot of veterans for them to they tend to go one way or the other. They're either very anti-war or they're either very hawkish and very pro-war. Dan Crenshaw, for example, is a veteran who is a super hawk. And then you've got folks like Major Danny Serson, I think that's how you say his name, who is an ultra-dove that writes for antiwar.com. So you really kind of get the binary there, and you don't get the feeling from Buttigieg, despite his paying lip service to ending the endless wars. He doesn't sound to me like one of these super dovish veterans who thinks that the mission was essentially a lie, and that he fought for nothing. He seems to think that he fought for something worthwhile over there, and that's his opinion. But if that is his opinion, he's not exactly going to keep us out of more wars. If he thought that invading Afghanistan and occupying it for perhaps not 18 years, but maybe 10 years was good, then I could see him saying that a lot of wars are good ideas. As Tulsi Gabbard pointed out last night, the Taliban weren't even affiliated with al-Qaeda. Yet somehow after 9/11, we decided to make it our mission to, expunge the Taliban from the earth. Now, interestingly enough, Joe Biden was the only candidate that I heard in these two debates, other than Tulsi Gabbard, who said, absolutely, it's time to pull the troops out of Afghanistan. I was surprised that you didn't have every other candidate on the stage jump in afterwards and say, oh, I believe in that too. We should get the troops out of Afghanistan. When Joe Biden said it, crickets. He was the only one. Which, of all people up there, I was surprised that he would be the first to say that. I mean, you would think, considering that Obama kept the troops in Afghanistan for his entire administration. And, Obama said, oh, we got the troops out of Iraq because that was a bad war, so we can focus on Afghanistan because that's the good war. Now, on immigration, it was quite interesting. Or I guess you could say immigration and healthcare is really a hybrid topic. Every candidate on that stage said that their healthcare plan would give free healthcare to illegal immigrants. That's how far we've come now. I mean, I don't know what to say other than that. Plenty of people, I'm sure, understand what the objection of the average American would be to giving free healthcare to illegal immigrants. I mean, this is not difficult, and it's not hard to see how that would not play out well in a general election. I can't imagine anyone, particularly Joe Biden, if he gets through the primary, leaving that in his plan. This is just something that you pander to the most coastal and most elite and most well-educated of the Democratic base, because average people are not okay with subsidizing the health care of legal immigrants. Now, further on the topic of health care, Bernie Sanders did confirm that his plan would in fact raise taxes on the middle class. Again, something that is a big third rail in American politics. Nobody wants their taxes raised. I mean, look at how well the rich are, and they're a small minority at getting at keeping their taxes from going up. Imagine if you tried to raise taxes on the middle class, people would riot in the streets. So again, all Trump has to do, if Bernie's the nominee, and I think Bernie would probably be the toughest contender to Trump. I think that Trump would get a lot of appeal if he simply said to people, hey, you elect Bernie, not only is he going to take away your health care, because of course Medicare for all bans private insurance, so you lose your current health insurance if you like it, you lose your doctor, blah blah blah. You would also get a rate, your taxes will go up. People are not going to like that. People don't like that kind of change. People like what they're used to for the most part. They like either what they already are accustomed to, or they want more free stuff. But you can't take away something even if you're adding free stuff. That scares people. And since the whole party, really, all of the people who are strong contenders for the nomination, really, have jumped on this Medicare for all bandwagon, except for, I guess, Joe Biden is probably still, hanging on to the whole, let's expand Obamacare, blah blah blah. I guess he has a pretty palatable plan. But if any of these other folks, like Harris or Sanders, whatever, if they get in, I think they're going to have a lot of trouble pushing that far on healthcare during a campaign. Oh, and how could I forget Kamala Harris's absolutely brain dead line when everyone was bickering and fighting? She jumped in and she said, people, please. America does not want to see a food fight. They want to see how we're going to put their food on their table. And then everyone clapped, and that was clearly a line that she practiced in the mirror for probably the entire past week, and she was just waiting for a moment to use it. And you could see the look on her face. She's like, I'm going to say it. This is going to be a great applause line. And it was absolutely terrible and contrived, if you ask me. And not only that, the statement itself was asinine. The idea that Americans want to see how presidential candidates will put food on the table? What, are you my dad? I mean, can you... that's beyond nanny statery. That's daddy statery. Like, the absolute conceit that it takes to even think that if you're running for president, the president of the United States puts food on people's table. No, people put food on their own table because they actually have to get up and go to work, and most people have jobs, and they earn money, and then they go out and buy food, and then there's food on the table. Or they cook food, perhaps, that they grew in a garden or something like that, or they, slaughter a cow, or, people get their own food. The president does not give them food unless you somehow are on some kind of federal food assistance program like SNAP or food stamps. Other than that, the president's not putting food on your table. And even if you are on government assistance, federal government assistance, the president is not paying for that. He's not footing the bill, or he or she is not footing the bill. The people footing the bill are folks who pay taxes, folks who actually make money and earn stuff that can be taxed, folks who are putting food on their own table. So the folks who are putting food on your table are, if you're not putting it on your own table, also have to put food on their own table for their own families. So it was just an insulting line all around, insulting that she would try and play it off as if it was natural, and insulting in the actual content of the statement. And, of course, there was a lot of hysteria about, the climate's going to go up 2 degrees over the next 100 years, so we need to completely shut down our economy. Frankly, at this point, you know what, go ahead. Turn off the economy. It's fine. Who the hell cares? I mean, it's not like these people are going to get any of this stuff passed, because it's way too painful for folks. There's no way that folks are going to tolerate the government essentially, engaging in degrowth. If the government, if we go into even a mild recession, presidents lose re-election pretty easily. I mean, I think that's clear at this point that going into a recession is not good for politics. So going into a government-induced recession as a part of their actual policy would be political suicide. And so the Republicans would, rule the world if the Democrats actually meaningfully tried to take on their stupid climate change agenda. And frankly, the U.S. population is going to be entering into a decline here soon. In a way that really the economy is going to stop growing anyway, and so we're not going to emit as much because we are going to have degrowth. Because we're going to have depopulation unless they import a bunch of migrants from the third world, which they keep trying to do, which is strange. Because if you care about climate change, you want to depopulate the United States. The U.S. is one of the top emitters in the world, so obviously if you emptied out the country and there were less people here, they'd use less energy. But I guess I shouldn't try and make sense of these people because they never seem to think things out too logically. That night one of the debate really was the exception, where folks were trying to be somewhat logical, at least it seemed, even though I thought they were wrong most of the time. But the folks on this second night, they absolutely threw that out the window. It was a bunch of trash. That's my take. So if you got anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and subscribing. And if you do subscribe, please do click the bell, because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.